day day of, I'll be like, man, I shouldn't have made them plans. I want to sit home.
The only thing I read this morning, and I haven't had much time to read anything in the news this morning, was something about a controversial call at the end of the game. Some kind of holding call that I don't know, but
I can't remember, but it was. I mean, it was.
It was
I
a
didn't
call
see
that
it.
should not have been made. It was a holding call, and he was definitely not holding. It was
okay, well,
very clear it was not a holding call.
well, there you go. Bobby giving us the play-by-play. All right. Yeah. It seems like it was a really good game.
It was.
It was.
I had. The important part is I had fun. So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
that's
that's
what
great.
matters.
Let's see, everybody always says Super Bowl Monday should be a holiday.
Right?
Probably because everybody is dealing with hangovers.
Not me.
Not me.
Not me.
Nope.
So we are starting week 6. Crazy.
Halfway there.
This term has flew by. Absolutely flew by for me.
No, I kind of feel the same way because I remember like a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh yeah, I got a couple of things to do, and then
And
I
all of a
looked at my
sudden,
I looked at
yeah.
my thing last night, and I was like, oh god, it's week 6 already. Okay, great.
Well, I'm going to have to give you guys as soon as we get started here, my mantra on hopefully you guys are working on these assignments due in the next couple of weeks because it's going to get busy here for you guys in the next couple of weeks. But hang on, hang tight, hold that thought. Okay, almost ready to go here. For those of you that are here, if you could put your name and your campus in the chat, that'd be great. Appreciate it. And did I give you guys the lowdown last week on at-risk reports? I think I might have done that with my Wednesday and Friday class. Did I talk about at-risk reports last week? No? Okay.
I don't remember that.
Pam shaking her head no. Okay, all right. I'll go through it. Okay.
Ok, mira, mami viene ahora, mamá va a comprar rápido algo and we're good, okay? Okay. It's close.
Okay, so everybody make sure you have your name and campus in the chat, please. Hey, I think I think we have most everybody in here. Let's see. Everybody on camera. You guys turn your cameras on, the ones that okay. Thank you. Okay. So welcome to week 6, halfway there. I don't know. Can somebody check to see if in your shell, if you have the mid-course evaluations ready yet for you to fill out? It would be up in, I believe, in your account section. Can you guys, somebody check on that? Please?
I don't think they are because I haven't received like the email saying, "Oh, it's time for midterm
Okay.
evaluations."
Okay, great, great. So that should be coming this week. So when I see, well, and hopefully see it come up, I thought it might have already been in there. If you could fill it out, that would be great. I love feedback and I would like to hear how you think things are going so far. Let's see, mid-course evaluations. Okay. Okay, so those aren't available yet. I am going to turn on the homework grades probably today. And can somebody explain to me what the purpose of turning on homework grades is?
See where you stand, pretty much.
Okay. You see where you stand, yes. And with regards to how your homework is going to affect your grade. So for example, if you right now are sitting at if you're right now sitting at a 78 and I turn on the homework grades and you have a couple of assignments missing, that's going to pull your grade below a 78. So if this were the end of the term, you would be a homework fail, or vice versa. If you are at a 80 and you're turning in all your homework, you're going to see your grade bump up. Okay? So I'll be turning on the homework grades. I don't have a lot of issues with homework in this class, but I will turn them on. So make sure, have a look at your grade today, see where you're at, and then I'll be turning them on later on. Okay, and I'll leave them on for probably this week and next week. And then I'll turn them off. Okay. Next is at-risk reports. So faculty are required to complete weekly, they're called at-risk reports, and I hope you've heard about them. We do them weekly. Everybody's required to do them in every class. And those are for students that are considered at risk. At risk can mean several things. Most importantly, if you're sitting below a 78 right now. If you're sitting below a 78, if you have attendance issues, if you have homework issues. So those are all reasons if we have any concerns. Okay, so I don't want you to be surprised if you get a call from your dean that says, how come you're late for class all the time? How come you haven't turned in your week 3 NCLEX? That's how your deans are knowing what's going on in this class, because I'm required to fill out these reports. Okay, so I don't want anybody surprised hearing from their dean. No, I'm not tattling on you, anything like that. This is just you're considered at risk, attendance, homework, below KGA below a 78. Okay, so again, I'm filling out those weekly. This is midterm week. So by the end of this week, we have to also complete what's called a mid-module evaluation. Okay, and since you guys don't have an exam until next week, I will need to be filling out the mid-module assessments based on everything through the end of this week. So if you have an at-risk report, you're going to get a mid-module assessment. That assessment is something that I send to you and ask you to set up a meeting with me so we can discuss a plan for the rest of the term. Okay, so when you get that, and it won't be till later this week. If you get that, if you could just set up a quick meeting with me and we'll just check in, see how things are going, make sure we have a plan for the rest of the term, I would appreciate that. Okay. So anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Okay, I hope you guys are working on your assignments that are coming up. because I think I remember telling you in week 1, once we get to week 7, which is next week, it gets to be real busy with you guys. Okay, we have the group project due in next week. Actually, the initial posting is due a week from Wednesday, right? Remember, you have to post your initial group project on Wednesday, and then you have till Sunday to complete your peer responses. I've got a lot of emails about the group project, just to clarify. Okay, it is a paper. It is not a PowerPoint. Okay, everybody works on different parts of the project. Somebody needs to take the lead on putting it all together. So I don't want everybody's individual contributions being uploaded. Okay, you need to submit the final paper, which means everybody's input is together. Okay, does anybody have any questions about that? It's not a PowerPoint. Your PowerPoint is your vulnerable populations assignment.
I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
So if for example, if you do your part on the project, and let's say that someone else it's not doing their part and they're not cooperating, they're not messaging on the group chat that it was placed, how will that be handled? Because me personally, I don't want to be held accountable because someone was not responsible for doing their part.
And who's speaking?
Ileshka.
Oh, okay. So if you turn in your final project and it's missing some work, somebody from the group needs to email me about what's going on. Okay, because that particular student doesn't get any credit for that group project. Okay.
Okay, great. I just don't want my
No,
grade to be affected.
Yeah, I haven't had a lot of issues with that, but I have had some issues with that. So the expectation is everybody has to participate. And so I'm relying on you to communicate to me if once your final project comes due, if it's incomplete, somebody needs to tell me why.
A question too. I don't know how that works. Is it like if there is 4 questions on it and there is like 5 people in the groups, everybody needs to like have a questions and we all put it together and send it. Each person need to send the same thing, or one person from
Yep.
the group just send it?
No, everybody needs to submit the final project. I realize I'm going to have 4 or 5 of the same projects. I realize that. But everybody
same
needs to
thing.
submit the same thing.
Okay.
Because once you submit it, it goes into the grade book. If you don't submit anything, I have nothing to put in the grade book. Okay, so everybody
Okay.
needs to submit their own. It's a paper, it's not a PowerPoint. The next project you have, I believe, is due in week 9, and that's your HESI prep. So hopefully you've been working on that, because that's kind of a big project. Okay, and we're getting into the final weeks here. So, in the next 2 weeks, it should be all complete. Okay, so your HESI's due in week 9, and then I believe your vulnerable populations assignment is due in week 10,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
And remember, week 10 is also an exam week.
Do we have to present that project in week 7, the group project? Do we have to?
I think we're gonna do that in week 8.
Okay.
We'll do that in week 8. We'll take the first part of class or the last part of class after we cover some content. We'll take part of class so you guys can do your mini presentations. And don't stress out about it. You're not grading on it. It's just each group takes just a couple of minutes explaining what they did and what they learned, and so we can all learn from it.
Okay.
Okay, so don't stress about those. Okay, don't not show up for class that day because you don't want to talk in front of the group. It's really a very informal, just tell us what you did, tell us what you learned, and yeah. So don't stress about that. But we'll do that in week 8. Okay. Vulnerable populations assignment that's due in week 10 is the PowerPoint. That's the PowerPoint assignment. You're doing your research project, right? On a vulnerable population. In your zip code, remember that. This isn't, don't send me, well, Please don't send me the homeless population in the United States is this. Here are their issues. Here are the barriers. Here are the gaps in resources. This has to be in your community. Okay, so for Denver, Colorado, or wherever you're from, whatever your zip code is, you have to be doing something in your zip code. Not a full national stat on homeless or violence or whatever you're doing it on. Please make it specific to your community. And then once we get through week 10, which is vulnerable populations assignment and an exam, the next week there's no break. You take your HESI. Okay, so this is what I was talking about at the beginning of the term, that once we hit week 7, it's a go. Okay, so hopefully you're working on, little by little, you're working on these things, these assignments. Okay? Questions? Hey, what are we covering today? Who's done their prep work? Who's done the readings? Who's looked at the 2 Canvas readings on occupational health and environmental health? Anybody take a look at the notes that I sent?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I'm not going to do it this week because I really didn't give you a heads up, but for quiz 5, there's a lot of classes now that are doing their quizzes at the beginning of the class to see what kind of preparation students have done coming to class. I haven't done that with you guys. But what I am going to do today that's a little bit different is after we do the content, I'm going to have you guys take the quiz on your own based on the content, and then we'll go over the quiz. Okay? Does that make sense? I know we've been doing it together, but it's actually a key graded assessment. So it's technically not a quiz if we're doing it all together. So this week, we're going to do it at the end of class, see how you do with your preparation and the content from the class. And then I'm going to, when we get to quiz 5, which I think is in week 8, maybe, we're going to try that quiz, and I'll remind you in the announcement, we're going to try that quiz at the beginning of the class to see how well everybody's prepared. Because remember, when I do my short lecture, it's simply a review of the content and the concepts that you should be preparing, you should have prepared for the beginning of class. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Okay.
Yes.
So, the expectation is that you come to class prepared, we review the concepts, and then we'll do the quiz, and then we'll talk about the quiz, like we always do. All righty? So does anybody know what we're covering today? What are we covering today?
Environmental health.
Occupational health.
Occupational health?
I think something about the barriers of learning.
Health education, the barriers to
I would say health education.
Health education, the barriers to learning. Okay, so I'm gonna jump to, let's see if I can make this work. I'm gonna try and, first of all, did everybody put their name in the chat? Make sure that's done. I'm going to jump to the book today. Okay, there were a couple of things going on in the book. Chapter 8, you were only asked to read a couple of pages. Whoops. Nope, I'm going to stop this. Hang tight. Okay. Can you guys see me again?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I am just going to review a couple of things in chapter 8. You guys, the chapter 8 is communication in the nurse-patient relationship. You're only asked to review 4 pages. Okay, so I just want to review some important things in the book, and then we'll jump to the notes to supplement that. Okay? So nurse-patient relationship. Okay, what when you think about the nurse-patient relationship, what do you guys think about? What needs to happen to develop a relationship?
Communication.
Trust, communication. What about patients participating in their plan of care? How do you get the patients engaged to participate in their plan of care?
By communicating, like showing them like what they need to learn in a way that you know for sure that they're actually gonna listen and they're actually gonna be able to carry out with what with the education provided to make sure that everything is accurate.
Okay. What about culture? How does culture play into the nurse-patient relationship?
You have to know who you're talking to and what are their beliefs.
Okay. What else about culture?
You need to treat each person as an individual,
Okay.
especially when it comes to culture, because they might practice some parts of a particular culture, but not others.
Okay. Think ADPI here. When you're doing an assessment, how do you measure how interested or how committed patients are to their own healthcare? Their own healthcare prevention, they already have a disease to the management of that disease. How do you do that assessment? I mean, think about it. Just put yourself in a patient's home. You're sitting there and you're doing your nursing process on a patient with, let's say, diabetes. How do you assess their knowledge?
I mean, you take a look at the environment. Well,
Could you ask them questions about their own health?
Okay.
Ask them how they know how to like do their own testing, or ask them how much involvement they would have. You want them participating with in their own healthcare and being able to take care of themselves.
Maybe assess the level of medications they have, the supplies they have. Do they have anybody to help them? What about their diet? What about their weight? Essentially, how are they managing their diabetes? We know that health education is in every part of our nursing profession, right? We are always educating, whether it's in the hospital, the urgent care, discharge teaching, long-term care, assisted living, and homes in the community. Patient education plays a huge, huge part of what we do. So one of the things we have to be mindful of is, how do we assess different populations we're teaching? What if you're teaching hearing impaired clients? What if you're teaching visually impaired clients? What if you're working with kids? What if you're working with elderly? What if you're working with families with language barriers or cultural barriers?
People that are maybe illiterate, that can't read.
Issues with health literacy versus health illiteracy. Right? There's a lot of people, and I don't say illiteracy in a derogatory way, but there are many, many lay people that are not health literate. So how do we teach them in terms that they understand? If it's a language barrier, maybe do we provide pamphlets or handouts in their language? Right? Hey, there's 3 ways we learn, and this goes for all of us. We learn the cognitive way, we learn the affective way, and we learn the psychomotor way. Does anybody review your notes to see what each of those are? What's cognitive learning? We all learn in all these three ways. However, I may be a primary cognitive learner.
Is that like by
Okay.
hearing and reading?
Cognitive, the thinking part.
To
Okay.
hear or read.
Your ability to hear and process information. Do you understand it? Can you memorize it? Can you use this information to solve problems? Cognitive, just think cognitive. Okay. Affective, what do we think affective is with an A?
It's learners' attitudes, feelings, beliefs, values.
Yep.
It's like the feeling part of the person.
Mm-hmm. And this does affect their ability to learn. And you will get asked about these three different learning models on the exam. So make sure you have an understanding of what each one of them is. So cognitive is thinking, affective is feeling, and what's psychomotor?
Is that doing, actually doing it?
Doing. So what's an example of psychomotor?
Skill checkoffs.
Teach
Blood
back
pressure.
method.
Teach back, demonstrating.
Teach back. Okay. And you have to, part of your assessment is determining what you think is the, for example, for me, I'm a cognitive learner. Is anybody a psychomotor learner? They have to have their hands on and do it.
That's me. Got to do it.
Okay. Who needs to think about something before they do it? Yeah. So all of us have different, we all use these three, but one may be more primary or two may be more primary than others. Okay, so those are our three domains of learning. Okay, and your notes go through the whole nursing process, okay, of patient education. So please take a look at that, right? So for assessment, what kinds of assessments would you do before you begin providing education to the families? Let's talk about that for a minute. What do we have to find out from the families? What do they already know? What else do we need to find out? Are they health literate or health illiterate? What else?
Are they
What about-
interested or motivated to learn?
Yeah. Are they motivated to learn?
Are they coping well? If the condition's particularly harrowing to deal with.
Right? This is all part of your assessment. What about planning? I'm going right with your notes. So the assessment information that we collect, we use in developing our plan or our goals. That's what planning is. Okay, behavioral goals. What are behavioral goals? Behavioral goals are important because they represent the desire to change. It's one thing to learn all the information and take it all in, but do they have the motivation for behavioral goals, which is the desire to change your behavior? Okay? If you don't have a goal, you can't evaluate. And then intervene. How do we create an environment conducive to learning? Like I said, what if you have a hearing impaired, vision impaired, maybe learning disability, adult, child? How do we create environments for all those different populations? What do you think? What kinds of environments do we need to be mindful of?
Well, home environment.
Home environment.
We're not always going to be teaching them at home. If we're the school nurse, we can't when we're not going to be going into
Exactly.
people's houses. If we're home health, yeah, but if we're school nurse or we're just at a clinic or something like that, we don't know how it looks at their house. So we need to prepare for, well, I don't want to say prepare for the worst, but I mean, just make sure that they have it in their head how to get a good environment for, you know, managing their condition.
What if you're in the school? Maybe it could be much more targeted with the student, especially the older student. But what about if you go into the home and there's an education issue with the parents and they don't understand? Then what?
I mean, you can teach them, not that, not that they'll always listen,
I mean, I worked
but
with a lot of kids who were diagnosed with diabetes during the school years. Okay, younger kids. And when you go and you're working with the parents to try and manage this as a family, there were some very difficult situations where parents truly didn't understand how to help their child care for their newly diagnosed diabetes. How do you shift your teaching and your learning so that you can kind of read the room, do the assessment of the whole family?
Yeah, see if there's like maybe another family member or a neighbor could help them.
But those are the things we need to consider. How in school it was a pretty conducive learning to environment, or conducive to learning. The school was. But, once you got into the home, it became much more difficult. Is it a home full of lots of dysfunction, lots of distractions? Right? Children. What's the best way to teach children? And that's another thing you guys need to be mindful of is for this exam is what's the best way to teach each group? What do you do for a hearing impaired? What do you do for a vision impaired? And I mean a few sentences. How would you teach children? How would you teach that each different population that might have challenges?
well, with a kid, if it were me, I would make it some kind of activity
Right,
to facilitate that learning. Because I
right.
mean,
Maybe a play activity. Sure.
right.
And you guys have probably learned this in what? Growth and development and fundamentals?
Children are also more like visual learners. If they see you do something, and also when you're talking to them, try to be like face to face with them, not like they down there and you up there, and they have to like try to be face to face with them, talk clear so they can understand.
What would you do with a patient who was, say, aphasic? What kind of teaching strategies would you use for patient education with an aphasic patient?
You use like a communication board.
Okay. What about standing in front of them? What about a visually impaired? What kinds of techniques or strategies could you use for a visually impaired client?
Braille.
Okay. What else besides Braille? What else?
You?
If they're visually impaired, find some type of audio format
Audio.
for teaching.
What about hearing impaired?
Hearing impaired, you want to go with visual. Maybe if you do have a sign language interpreter or just somebody who can convey the message to them, that would be very, very key to teaching those patients.
Okay. And then how do we evaluate? And again, this is just a summary. I'm just quickly going through these notes. You guys need to read through these notes and have a pretty good understanding of the nursing process and patient education that's outlined in your notes. How do we evaluate the outcomes of our patient education?
Have them teach it back to you.
Teach back. That's excellent. Excellent. What about asking them questions about specific topics that you covered? Asking them to tell you back what they learned. What about asking for feedback on how you delivered your teaching? Was it helpful? Was it not helpful? So patient education, super important in the community setting. We're going to be you're doing a lot of that. So you have to know your audience. You have to know all different kinds of potential barriers with impaired clients, with age of clients, maybe with the content. Okay. Give me some examples of a primary intervention with patient education. What would be primary?
Maybe teaching.
You guys should be
how
able to rattle these off pretty easily. What's primary?
Teach a
Vaccine?
parent how to be a role model, like teaching parents how to role model like healthy behaviors, exercising or eating, so that what their children are seeing is all healthy instead of not.
Okay.
Immunizations.
Immunizations. Yep. You're trying to prevent something before it happens.
Screenings.
Screening is secondary. Remember? Screening, secondary is early identification, early intervention. Primary is the prevention.
Seatbelts, wearing helmets.
Yep. Yep. Those are teaching strategies to prevent an accident before it happens. So I'll go back to my school nursing days. Yes, we teach about seatbelts. We teach about, car seat safety. We teach about good hand washing. We teach safe sex education, risks of obesity, risks of substance abuse. You try and get to them before anything is developed. And then what about secondary? We know that's screening. What are some secondary interventions in patient education?
Mammographies.
Yep, screening for mammograms. Yep, yep. What else?
Pap smears.
Yep. Let's say, in addition to those kinds of screenings, let's say you're working with a group that you've identified as they may be at higher risk for obesity. They may be higher at risk for substance abuse. We've identified them, they're early identified. Now, what is your early intervention? Doesn't have to be just screening. You're starting
Diet, like a dietitian.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
maybe like rehab, like something that can help them guide and maybe control their addiction little by little.
Well, rehab is more tertiary, but you've identified them to be at risk. So now you're trying to work with them so that secondary doesn't turn into tertiary, right? You're trying to help them manage the risk they have right now and maybe kind of reverse course.
That'd be screening for STDs also for like the drug use.
Yeah. And then tertiary is they have something, right? They have a condition, they have a disease, the accidents happen, the traumatic injuries happen. And then what kind of patient education do we do in this level?
Like diabetics and stuff like that.
Right, but what do we do?
Teach them
Management
about
of
diet.
symptoms.
Teach them how to take their
Maintain.
We help them manage their we help them manage their condition. We try and help them try and not let whatever they have progress forward, right? We try and help them reduce their side effects. Okay.
We can try to help them to like with the sign and symptom of the disease that will be tertiary, right?
Minimize those. Sure. Sure. So do you guys have a good understanding of primary, secondary, tertiary at this point in general?
Yes.
Because there's several questions on the next exam about primary, secondary, and tertiary. And remember, Primary, secondary, you have to be able to take each concept. We're talking about, like, this is patient education we're talking about. You have to be able to identify primary, secondary, tertiary interventions for patient education. We'll talk about occupational health and environmental health in a minute. You have to be able to identify primary, secondary, and tertiary interventions with occupational health and environmental health. So you have to be able to shift your thinking for each concept we're covering. And be able, but the general theme applies. Primary is prevention, secondary is screening, tertiary is treatment or management. All right? Questions about education? Okay, let me make sure I covered, hang on. Barriers to learning. What do they know? What is the most important? Education, language, literacy, health literacy we talked about. We talked about the 3 domains of learning. Remember, let me be a little bit more specific here. With psychomotor learning, okay? 3 conditions have to be met. This is in your study guide. Okay, this is under your education, your study guide. I'm actually trying to make sure I cover the notes, the book, and the study guide. Okay, so what are the 3 conditions that have to be met with psychomotor learning? They have to have the ability to include both cognitive and psychomotor abilities. That's 1. They have to have a sensory image of how to carry out the skill. It's number 2. And then the opportunity to practice the new skill. Okay, that's in your study guide under the education section. We talked about this. One of the most important learner-related barriers is literacy. Okay, talked about that. We talked about when there's a language barrier, providing written instructions. What happens if, this is on your study guide, what happens if the client lacks self-confidence about learning? What are your strategies? Because somebody who may have low literacy or low education may have low self-confidence in the ability to understand the information, take in the information. They may be embarrassed to say that they don't understand what you're teaching them. These are all real scenarios. What do you do with a patient that lacks confidence in the ability to learn?
Explore the client's feelings. Like go into depth with them, how they're feeling.
I think one of the things that you should find out. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Explore their feelings, yes. And Bobby, what were you saying?
I was going to basically find out what's making them feel apprehension about their self-esteem. Like, what are they struggling with that maybe you could help them, give them a better insight or a different insight on it.
Okay. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
Just provide positive feedback to them.
Yeah. Figure out
Or
how they learn.
you can assess the barriers to know if like the way they prefer to learn, if it's like the way they can understand it, if it's like writing or pictures or anything, the way they can understand it easier. You assess the barrier, if it's their languages, the culture, all of that can be an issue.
That's all part of your assessment. What are their barriers to learning? Like we said, it could be a language barrier, it could be a cultural barrier, it could be a literacy issue, it could be a self-confidence, it could be fear. So, but we're in a position where we need to do that assessment. When does discharge planning start?
The beginning of admission.
And the admission.
Why?
You want to get them out of there as soon as they can and make sure that everything is taken care of so there's nothing missed before the discharge process.
Excellent. So anybody want to add to that? That's exactly why we started on admission.
Gives you
because we're
frame.
already planning for discharge on admission. So we need to be assessing what their needs are upon discharge. Because that's part of what we work on while they're in the hospital, is making sure their needs are met when they get home. Whether it's physical therapy, oxygen, or occupational therapy, maybe home equipment.
Well, rehab, if they're going to an actual facility, that will also be part of it, right? Especially because you have to identify their needs before they're in the process of getting discharged and all that, right?
Right, because the accepting facility needs to know what needs the patient's going to have when they get to their facility, not when they show up at the doorstep. Right? That's what case managers do. That's a big role of case managers in the inpatient settings. They're the ones who organize the care that the client's going to need, whether it be at home or rehab or long-term facility. Okay. So education is a huge part of our role. Let's talk about occupational health. What's occupational health? What does the occupational health nurse do?
This is the health of the workers at any given place.
Yeah. Say that a little bit louder.
I said assesses the health of the workers at any given place. So, I mean, well, you could have one for the hospital, or at any given place where there's people that could work or could hurt themselves or have conditions that could prevent them from working.
So you're right. That's a good part of it. Occupational health is ensuring the health and safety in the workplace. It's all about the workplace, occupational health. Okay. If you work in a large facility, you probably have an occupational health department. If you work in a smaller facility, you might have an occupational health nurse or a small team. So what kinds of things? Think about it. Well, let me first say that as far as occupational health goes, there's really no safe work environment. Everything has risks. It's whether it's an office building versus a hospital. You can fall down the stairs in an office building just like you can fall down the stairs in a hospital. Right? A patient can be injured in a medical office building just like a patient could be injured in a hospital. Right? Employees in a McDonald's can get hurt moving a piece of equipment, just like an employee working at the bank can get hurt lifting a piece of equipment. Okay, so there's really no safe workspace. The goal is to make sure workplaces are safe.
Quick question. Is that different from like an older adult being able to like do their ADLs, or that's different?
No, I mean, if they're, what do you mean? Like if they're in a facility?
Yeah. They have occupational therapy or whatever they call it.
Well, it would be, occupational health in that form would be making sure that the workers are knowledgeable and educated enough to take care of the patients. Do they know how to lift properly, transfer properly? Does that make sense?
Oh, I guess I was thinking about it wrong. Like when they go to the rehab, or they're, if they broke their arm, for example, they're teaching them to pick up stuff and stuff like that. That's what I was thinking about. Like
that's more occupational therapy. Occupational health is ensuring safety in the workplace. Okay, so let's say you work in a noisy factory. What kinds of things is the occupational health nurse gonna have to be mindful of? First of all, the occupational health needs to know what the job descriptions are of everybody, right? What are they being asked to do? Think of a large facility like a hospital. You have nurses, you have doctors, you have radiology, you have food workers, you have all different kinds of workers that all have different job descriptions. How do you keep everybody safe? How do you make sure, when you start a new job, you go through all that new employee training? That's usually done by the occupational health department. They need to make sure that you are working within the confines of your job description. If you're responsible for lifting, you have to make sure you can lift safely, right? I mean, the goal of the occupational health nurses is to keep workers at work, right? Prevention of illness and injury, right? Monitoring for hazards in the work environment. What about if you work in a chemical plant? They're responsible for monitoring toxic chemicals. What about a noisy plant? What about a environment that you're standing a lot? Extreme temperatures, heat, cold, radiation exposures. And what about the psychosocial, the burnout, the stress? I mean, they say we spend a third of our waking hours at work. People bring a lot to work, both physically and psychosocially, do they not? Workplace violence. Okay. Let's see. Occupational nurses typically not only are responsible for the safety on site, but they act like case managers. They're doing counseling. They're doing support groups. They're working with people who maybe have substance abuse or addiction issues. All those kind of people that have those issues, those vulnerable populations, go to work as well. Or at least a good part of them do. Right? Occupational nurses have a huge role in keeping the work environment safe. From a physical standpoint, a financial standpoint, trying to keep people at work, or a psychosocial. Hey, what if you have a group of diabetic patients that work in your building, and all of a sudden there's an increase in absenteeism among these workers? What do? Maybe you pull them all in, find out who needs what support. Do they have equipment? Has their glucometer broke? Are they out of supplies? How do we keep them at work? A lot to think about with occupational nursing. What other kinds of things do you think about? What about an accident? Does anybody ever participate in a visit from OSHA? Does anybody know what OSHA is?
I just did at my hospital, and
They're
people
not
were
fun.
running around. No, people were running around making
Oh, yeah.
sure everything was according to the regulations and all that stuff. And you will see like the nurses change their whole care. Like you're used to seeing stuff that it's not how it's supposed to be. And all of a sudden you see the most laziest nurse that do stuff completely different from what you're actually being taught, being like doing stuff how they should. And I was like, my mind was just blown. I was like, what in the world is going on? But it is it is a thing that, in my personal opinion, I think that just because they're having the visit doesn't mean that you need to like yes, you have to make sure everything's accurate and all that stuff, but just because you're not being watched doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing the things how you should do it. You like really be bad.
So OSHA is what OSHA, we call them kind of the enforcers. They can show up at any point in time during the workday or beyond the workday. They are the enforcers of the occupational health rules, safety rules. If there's an injury or if a patient accidentally dies in the OR, if there is an injury or a chemical spill or workers getting hurt, that's the group that will come out and do their assessment at your facility. So Alishka just gave a great example of an OSHA visit. Okay, what else about occupational health can you think about as any other roles that the nurse would play? She also does a lot of education, primary education, right? It's not just all about mistakes and, you know, sorting those out or people being absent, sorting those out. They're also responsible for doing a lot of teaching, a lot of preventative teaching, workplace safety, maybe health and nutrition. I know at our large school district, we had a health and safety wellness team that was part of occupational health, planning events for employees as far as good nutrition, exercise, you know, coping, stress reduction. So occupational health is an important role in nursing, really important, especially for the workplace. Okay, let's talk about environmental health. What's environmental health? Think about all the risks we have in our environment. Did we have this discussion last week about anybody ever see the movie Erin Brockovich? What's Erin Brockovich about?
She becomes a lawyer, and she's not a lawyer, she's a legal aid. She's trying to take care of her kids, and she comes upon this job, and she ends up going into the community. They're defending a case on, is it a water company? Something to do with the water. It's been a while since I've seen it, but it's something to do with the water in the community, and it's causing people to have different diseases. And they're basically suing the company to get money for these people who have developed all these terrible diseases. And I think some people even died from it, if I remember correctly, but she herself, she's not even a lawyer. She just kind of happened to come upon this job and becomes a legal aid for this small lawyer in town.
So it was an environmental disaster.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay. I knew
right. Remember,
like
it was the environmental disaster. Yeah. I mean, that's part of it. Environmental disaster based on contaminated water that infected or exposed a whole town. People were getting sick. They were dying of cancer, young kids, older people. And it was from a toxic spill from a large company. Okay. So when we talk about environmental health, just think about your own community. I take for granted that the air I breathe in my community is safe. I take for granted that the water I drink out of my tap is clean. I just assume that if I go out to eat or if I go to if I go out to eat or go to a fast food, that my food is prepared correctly. as to not risk any kind of food poisoning. Right? I take that for granted. Do most of you take that for granted? It's somebody else's job to figure all that out, right? Think about all the environmental risks just in your own zip code. Do you live near an airport? Look what's going on in Ohio right now with that train derailment. Do you live near a waste site? Do you live in an inner city that has close housing? Do you live in a city that has a high crime rate? Do you live in a town that has gang activity? Do you live in an industrial community near a transportation hub?
We have a nuclear power plant.
A power plant, nuclear power plant. I mean, think about environmental health and everything we're exposed to on any given day, whether we're at home, at work, our kids at school. Environmental health is incredibly important to be mindful of when you're working out in the community. Okay, they say that environmental hazards are responsible for over 1/2 of disease in the world and contribute to over 80% of communicable and non-communicable diseases and injuries. That's a pretty big statistic. Okay, environmental health is determined by genetics, socioeconomic status, and environmental exposures. So think about this. I'm looking at the notes now. Think about the people who live in poverty, live in overcrowded conditions. They may have poor quality foods to choose from. They may have more hazardous jobs, living in older homes that may have lead-based paint. Maybe living in school districts that aren't performing well, right? Or older daycare centers. Okay. So when you're doing an environmental risk assessment, you need to find out where people live, where they work, where they go to school, where they send their children to school. What do they eat? What does their diet look like? There's always a concern about, a diet high in fish. Why is that? What does fish have? High levels of what?
Mercury.
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 That's an environmental risk. Pesticides. Do they use pesticides? Cleaning supplies in your home have pesticides. Gardening, landscaping, that all has chemicals and pesticides. So think about what you have in your home. Lead-based paint. What do we know about lead-based paint? Where is it found?
Older
Buildings.
home. Houses before 1978.
Pardon me. Great. And who's most exposed to lead-based paint? The kids, right?
Children.
Yeah.
Why?
Developmental delay and cognitive deficit.
The paint, they're closer to the ground.
They like to chew.
They
so
put it in
they
their
chew
mouth.
on the windowsills and the paint will chip
Yeah,
off.
they're always in the ground and they're more sensitive. They don't have like defense mechanisms.
Yep. Exactly. So let's talk about real quick, what would be a primary intervention for teaching a family about lead-based paint? What's primary?
Make sure there's no peeled paint on the floor.
That's secondary. What's primary? Teaching
The year
them
of the house, the year that the house was built, or
Yes.
teaching about it.
Teaching about how to prevent them from having a lead exposure. So teaching them about older homes. Right? What to look for, how to prevent a lead-based illness. What about secondary? Early identification, early intervention. So maybe in secondary, you've identified the house to have lead. Right?
That's where you do the blood test also in the secondary?
Yep. So you've identified a high-risk home. Right? Maybe screening to see if they have any early blood levels that are increased.
Or asking them the years of the house was built, were they living?
Yep. Yep. And then tertiary, what's happened?
They already have it. So
They've
you might
already been
positive.
Yep. Already been exposed. And so they're coming to you with signs and symptoms of lead exposure. Right? So now you have to treat that. And obviously the goal is to get their blood levels down of lead. Okay. We talked about pesticides. What about water contamination? 30 million Americans drink water that does not meet the EPA's safe drinking water standards. Right? And we know that the quality of the water is tied into the quality of the soil. When we think about environmental risks, we think about air, water, soil, and food. Those are the biggest 4 risks. There's many other risks. But for purposes of this class, those are the 4 we think about. Okay? Air pollution. Motor vehicles, air pollution. 50% of Americans live in areas where the air quality does not meet the national standards. We know that cars are the biggest source of air pollution. Okay, and then waste incineration. Food contaminants. Salmonella. E. coli. Let's see. Toxicology, we know what the toxicology is, the study of health effects. Epidemiology, how does epidemiology play into environmental health? Right, so epidemiology here, a good example is epidemiology would be studying in exposure. Let's say food poisoning exposure. What are the effects on the population from this food exposure? That's your epidemiological study. Okay. Make sure I covered this. Okay. So there's your content. So we covered education, barriers, occupational health, environmental health. Please, please, if you did not read your notes for this week, they're very good, very detailed. All right. And then in the book, in chapter 8, there's only 4 pages, and that's about communicate the nurse-patient relationship. And that's what we talked about that at the beginning of the class. What does it take for us to develop a nurse-patient relationship? Then chapter 9, you're responsible for the whole chapter, and that's about health education. But we've covered a lot of it, and the notes are a great summary of chapter 9 as well. Okay, so let's everybody pull up exam quiz 4. And we're going to do it differently. I'm going to have you take it now, and then once you submit it, you'll get your answers, and we need to live with the grade we got for now, and then we're going to review everything. Okay, so this would be a combination of how well you prepare for class and how much we get out of class today. So go ahead and take that exam, and then just let me know when you're finished, and we'll review it.
Like quiz 4 in the modules?
Yeah, go to quiz 4 in week 6.
If we got a low grade, you're not gonna, when we review it, you're gonna change it, no?
No, not to, we need to, I feel like I've been kind of doing it, not wrong, but I need to get on board with what everybody else is doing. And we're gonna do quiz 5 at the beginning of class, so. Yeah, you need to live with the quiz grade you get now, and then we're gonna go through and review all the questions.
Don't be like everybody else, Miss Marvel. Come
I
on.
know.
Don't do it.
We getting close? we go through it? Or do you guys need some more time?
I need a few more.
Almost done.
Okay, how about a couple more minutes?
I'm done.
Okay. How'd you do?
10.
Oh, good. Good, good. So it can be done. Awesome. All right, let's go through it. Because I want to make sure we have enough time to go through it. Okay.
1 second. I'm not done. I'm in denial.
All right. All right, gang. Which statement is true regarding children and environmental health hazards? Which do we think is the right answer?
B.
I heard a B. Why do we think B is correct?
I mean, if there's something nasty on the floor and he says go eat it, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody, can you explain that again?
If there's something nasty on the floor and the little one goes, ooh, that's colorful, and he puts it in his mouth.
It's part
There you
of
go.
what it's part of that theory that everything they can touch, they put them on their mouth.
Yep. Does everybody understand that? For those of you, if you got that question wrong, what did you choose?
B.
Why is D wrong?
Because it can cause neurological conditions.
They're more likely, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just the opposite. Okay, and A, just the opposite, right? So B was the correct answer. What about question 2? Now, when you guys submitted your quiz, did you get back the questions you got wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Yes? Okay, all right. During a home health visit for a pregnant client, the nurse notes the client's husband regularly uses pesticides at work. Which nursing intervention is a priority? Priority is a key word.
Remind him to remove his clothes.
Okay. And do not let his wife handle them. Why is that the correct answer?
A risk of exposure to his pregnant wife.
Okay. Did anybody else pick something else?
Could be.
Okay. B's so this is another example of a question where if you look, all answers could be correct. right? Is there any answer that could not be correct? It's asking what is the priority. Okay, so the priority, the very first priority is A. B, C, and D you can address, but A is the priority. Does that make sense?
I was thinking because it wasn't B because it said that he was at work. He may work with pesticides like a farmer or something.
You were thinking it was B instead of A?
No, it wasn't B because he's at work, so he
At
could be a
work.
farmer. So they can't stop using pesticides.
So, wait, so you're saying B should be wrong?
Right, I was thinking it wouldn't be B because it said
Right.
he was at work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. But at work, maybe he has control of it, but maybe at home, right? At
And the
home,
wife is pregnant too, so he can expose the wife if he come inside with his clothes, with the clothes exposed already at work. So he needs to leave them outside. Do not come in inside. He's gonna contaminate inside.
Yep. Well, A is the correct answer. But you can also, I mean, we're looking for a priority intervention. But the other three, like recommend that he avoid using pesticides at home or outside in the yard, that could potentially be a suggestion, but it's just not the priority suggestion, right?
The priority is because he has the pesticide on his clothes.
Correct.
So
Correct.
we're trying to prevent any other exposure to his wife, whatever he's exposed to.
That's exactly right. Home health nurse works in the community, a community that has high rates of complex illnesses and neurological disorders. Which environmental characteristic is priority? Again, another Q word.
Everyone needs water to live. And if there's a problem with the water,
It's C.
Okay, it's asking if there is a high rate of chronic illness, neurologic, what could potentially be the characteristic, the environmental issue that might be causing this? Priority.
Could be the presence of the manufacturing plants close to the community's rivers can affect the water.
Yep. C's the correct answer. Did anybody else pick anything else? Remember, it was asking for a priority.
I did, but I think it's how I read it. But I do see that I understand why C is the answer. But I think I was thinking more so like, okay, this is the problem. Now what's the priority? Like, how would you? I don't know.
Okay.
So I put about the water filter.
Okay.
I read it wrong.
Okay. So yes, D could be correct, but it's not the priority. Those are those priority questions you guys really have to take a good look at, because if there's more than one answer that could be correct and you only get to select one, please go back and reread the question and see if there's a word in there that you missed. Okay. So this question, number 3, is environmental health. Okay, the nurse is reinforcing education about the diabetic client. Which client statement indicates a barrier to learning? So this is, what kind of question is this? Positive or negative?
A negative.
That's a negative question.
Why is it a negative question?
because they want to see what the
Because
client's saying that's wrong.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what's the right answer?
Last
D.
one.
D.
Why is D the correct answer?
He's going to have a specific diet that's prescribed to him, not whatever you read online.
Does that make sense to everybody?
Because she doesn't really want to do the education on the diet. She prefer to just follow a diet keto instead
Right.
of the one they
What if
teaching her.
Right. What if a keto is not recommended?
Yeah.
I mean, the other things he says are good. I'm ready to learn the things I need to do to change. I'm familiar with medical terminology. English is my primary language. Those are all good things. Those are not barriers. Right? So you're looking for something he says that you know is either incorrect or he needs more education. Can everybody see how that's a negative question? Okay, number 5, which nursing intervention will enhance the learning for a client who speaks English as a second language? Would you guys choose here?
B.
Which one?
B. B.
B.
Create a pamphlet in their primary language.
And why is that the correct answer?
If you have to give them something in their language that they understand, it's easier for them to understand it.
And right. And number 2, it's written. They can take with them. Right? They can take it with them. Why would A be wrong?
They won't be able to review it later because it's not in their primary language, so they won't understand it.
They won't understand it. Right? Same with C. You can ask them to teach back, but if they haven't understood it, how are they going to teach back?
Teach it back.
Right? And D is just ridiculous. Okay. Number 6, home health nurses reinforcing education on the use of a glucometer. Which approach would be most effective? Again, a key word, most effective.
A.
This is another question that all answers look okay. You could, if it did, but then what did you miss? Most effective. What's most effective?
With a question like this, what helps me with it, if it helps anybody else, is you could think of all of these in the steps as a steps in a process. You can do all of these, but which one are you going to do first?
Mm-hmm. Well, think about psychomotor learning. What is psychomotor learning? One of the 3 domains. What do you want to do with psychomotor learning?
You show me how to do something and then I'll learn how to do it.
Exactly. So what's the correct answer?
A.
Most effective. So the most effective way to do this education would be the teach back. Right? Demonstrate and then have them return the demonstration. The other 3 are not bad answers. They'd all add to the learning. Right? But what the question is asking, most effective, most. Did you guys get that right? And do you understand why that's most? Okay, home health nurses reinforcing education for an 8-year-old with type 1 diabetes. Which approach will be most effective? Another key word.
A.
Okay. Anybody have a different answer than A?
I did.
What did you have?
But I know why I got it wrong, because I chose A the first time, but then I went back and read it and I was thinking because of the age, 8 years old, I chose to teach the parents rather than the child. But then right after I submitted, I was just like, yeah, that's not the answer. I know why.
8-year-olds are, yeah, teach through play, toys, dolls. So in the schools, when we were teaching 8-year-olds to give their own injections, right? Because they had a desire to do their own injections. We were showing them how to do that with toys, dolls, puppets. Okay.
Make sure the little guy feels included.
Yep. Yep. They can't handle long, comprehensive sessions. Sure, we want to involve the parents, but we don't want to just teach the parents and not the child. You should be amazed at how many 8-year-olds want to be independent in their care with type 1 diabetes, whether it be with insulin injections or, maneuvering their pump, giving them their doses through the pump. And they may not be able to read through these written pamphlets. Okay. Number 8, which nursing intervention is priority? Again, a key word for a client who's not motivated to learn.
Establish rapport.
Mm-hmm. So if you have somebody who's not motivated to learn, how are you going to get them motivated if you really haven't developed some kind of a relationship with them to open up and maybe articulate to you why they're not motivated?
I didn't think about that one hard enough.
What'd you choose?
I chose B because it being an open-ended question to get them talking on why they didn't want to, why they're not motivated, so that maybe you could figure out what to do that might be able to motivate them.
Yeah,
okay.
I picked C because I was like, well, if you don't know how they learn, how are you going to teach them?
Yeah, I almost chose C too until I read it for the second time, because at first, like he said, I was thinking like, okay, you should know how it is that works, what learning style works for them. But I know that establishing a rapport is, I guess, the priority. But I did almost choose
You almost chose what?
C, about it says assess the client's preferred learning style.
Mm-hmm. Well, first we need to establish trust and rapport. I think number 2 would be assess the client's preferred learning style. Because the question asks, what do we have to do first? What's the priority? I think asking the client why they're unwilling to learn or change could be a little bit confrontational if we haven't really developed a relationship with them. They may see that as, I don't know, disrespectful or but if it's asking a priority, if you have an answer to establish trust and rapport with the patient, that's always going to be a priority, because that comes first before we can develop any kind of a relationship with the patient, especially if we're going to be discussing something like, hey, why aren't you motivated to learn? Does that make sense?
You could also think of it like, I mean, I almost picked that one too, but then I kind of thought, okay, but that's pointing at them and going, you're doing something wrong. Why are you doing that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and that might make them feel mad at you.
Yeah, that's why I said it can be kind of confrontational if you haven't developed that rapport or relationship with them first. They may see it as being intrusive. The occupational health nurse is caring for a client who reports lower back pain that is worse at the end of the workday. What nursing intervention is a priority?
Assist with lifting techniques and safe body mechanics.
Do we think B is the right answer?
What are you lifting, and are you doing it right?
It's a prevention.
Well, we're looking at what is the priority. Well, if we know that they're reporting back pain after work, right after work, then priority would be to maybe assess their lifting techniques and body mechanics. Right? It's clearly saying it's worse at the end of the workday. We're occupational nurses, we're really not in a position to recommend pain management. We don't necessarily need a referral for an expert medical evaluation. And I don't know, what if they, providing a list of local massage therapists, were kind of picking their treatment for them, right? But think about when it says the occupational health nurse, think about what her role is. Her role is to assess health and safety in the workplace. So she would need to be assessing lifting techniques for safe body mechanics. Maybe this employee hasn't been trained or is not using correct lifting techniques, and that's causing the lower back pain at the end of the day. Again, priority. The key word was priority. Okay. And last question, which statement is true regarding scheduling of client education?
B.
B.
Why is it B?
Because you want to make sure that they are 100% understanding and they're willing. Because I mean, if you catch them right after they woke up, they're gonna be like, oh no, I don't want to do this, because obviously they just woke up. You have to pick a time in the day that works best for everyone to ensure that they're actually gonna be 100% there and willing to do it.
If I'm
Excellent
chilling,
answer.
if I'm chilling in my chair, hanging out, that's going to be a better time to teach me something than if I'm running around at work.
Yep. Yep. And remember, it's a partnership, right? Even though we might be on a schedule, our clients are on schedules too, right? And to be most effective, it has to be a partnership, deciding together what's the best time, what's the best place, and assessing when they're ready to learn. They may want to do some research on something, right? Before you go ahead and do teaching with them. So that's a good question about patient education. And establishing a relationship, what works best for all of us. Okay. So B was the correct answer on that. So how'd you do?
I got a 90.
Okay, good.
Are you gonna put 1 point on it? No.
No, not today.
So next week we're gonna have it before class.
When's our next? I have to look in the syllabus. I don't have
Week
it
8.
memorized. Yeah, week
Because
8.
week 7 we're gonna have exam.
Yeah. So we don't have any, next week we have an exam. So week 8, we're gonna do the quiz before class.
Together or by yourself now?
By yourself. And then we're gonna review it at the end of the class. I just want to see how prepared you're coming to class. The fact that you guys did well today, taking it by yourselves, that's good. That means either you prepared or I did my due diligence in class. So
yeah, go over it when you're talking. It's better because
I know.
It's better when we take it after class. I like before we finish.
I know. But as we're preparing you guys for next gen, this is the way it's moving. And so preparation for class is an important part, because then I can summarize the concept information and have it actually be in addition to what you've prepared for. So it's not meant to have anybody do bad or anything. It's just to prepare you guys for next gen.
Dr. Marv, a quick question.
Yes, Omar.
Do these quizzes reflect on the KGA at all?
Yeah, they're each worth, is it 1%? 1 point? I think there's 5 quizzes, 5. Yes. So the exams are 55, right? And the quizzes are 5.
Okay.
The exams are a little bit less than 20%, and the quizzes are 1 each.
Or I should have, let me rephrase that.
Oh.
are they immediately applied to the KGA after you
Yes,
take?
yes, they are.
Okay, because I looked at mine and my KGA before I took it, and after I took it, it hasn't moved a budge.
Right, because I haven't turned the homework grades on.
Ah, bada bing. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I need to turn homework on and then you'll see the bump.
Okay.
Okay? All right, that's all I have for today. Does anybody have any questions? Did you learn a lot today?
Yes.
Okay. Good to see everybody. Have a good rest of the week. You know where to reach me. And then don't forget, this week is your 3 reviews for the exam, right? I sent that out in another announcement with the schedule. There's an exam tonight, Wednesday, and Friday, exam review. So if you can try and get to one of those, that'd be fantastic. You'll have the recordings, but see if you can try and get to one in person. I know everybody's super, super crazy busy. But try and get to one if you can.
And I see next week we got the exam, second exam, and the group project is due. It's not gonna do in Sunday. When I was looking at it, it's due
It's
on
due
Wednesday.
Wednesday. The initial project, it's like a discussion question. It's due on Wednesday so that you have from Wednesday to Sunday to read your other peers, because it's posted in the discussion thread. So you have to reply to 2 of your peers.
Oh, I think I see you submit it like in assignments when you submit it. In week 7, it show you like where you submit it.
Oh, it's not in the discussion thread?
It's not.
Okay, then just submit it as a paper.
Submit it. Yeah,
But you
they cannot see it. The other peers won't be able to see it the way it looks like.
Let me check on that.
Yeah.
Let me check on that. I'll get back with you guys. I'll put out an announcement, but yeah, you have to be able to see it too. Okay, I'll get back on that. But remember, yeah, next week you have your group project due on Wednesday and you'll be taking your exam on Monday, week from today. Okay?
Ready for work.
All right, well, you guys have a good week. Reach out if you need anything, and good to see everybody today. Thanks for all your participation and your engagement. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
See you
you.
later. Michael, I'll see you in an hour or so.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. I have to meet with another student now. Kendra, hi. Do you
Hey.
Oh, hey, let me just take off the